What the scariest true story you know? The story of the Lake Nyos disaster. The lake periodically belches a cloud of invisible carbon dioxide gas that suffocates everything within a 16-mile radius. In 1986, over 1,700 people and all their livestock died without even understanding what was happening to them. I've told this story before. I'm an eye doctor and I had a patient come to me with an infected eyelid. 2 other eye doctors tried to treat and failed. They were dumping all sorts of medicine into it and it wasn't getting any better. At this point, it was swollen and painful for weeks with no improvement despite being on tons of meds. Apparently, neither of them thought to flip the lid upside down. You know that gross trick some kids do with their upper eyelids? It was a painful maneuver for her very swollen eyelid, which might explain it. Anyhow, there appeared to be what looked like a visible abscess inside the tissue with thick gooey material. I thought I'd give it a nudge and saw it move. This wasn't an abscess. It was something else. I managed to remove it quite easily in one whole piece. It was a fly larva. The patient told me that she had a bug hit her in the eye a few days before she got this infection. I removed the larva and within 2 days the wound closed and she was 100% recovered on basic antibiotic eye drops. Yes, I do have the photos from this case for those interested. TLDR. Patient had a bug lay an egg in her eyelid and I removed the larva. I remember reading ages ago about a guy who was in the military. He got back home after a tour of duty to find his wife and 2 kids dead. They lived in a remote location. Turned out the mom had a sudden heart attack or stroke or something and the 2 little kids had died of starvation or dehydration as they were too young to care for themselves. Not exactly a ghost story. But as a parent that scares the shit out of me. Alison Botha. On December 18, 1994, Port Elizabeth resident Alison Botha was abducted, raped, stabbed and left for dead by Frans du Toit and Theuns Kruger. They slashed her throat 17 times. So deep she had to hold her own head on as she crawled to the road for help. With her other hand she had to hold in the organs spilling from her stomach, where she had been stabbed more than 30 times. By some miracle the knife thrusts had missed her main arteries, so she did not bleed to death and was able to breathe through her severed trachea. There is a documentary that is on Amazon Prime called Alison. Worth the watch but might be traumatic for some viewers. Trailer for Alison. The story of Jamie Kloss is terrifying. In rural Wisconsin last year, a 13 to 14-ish-year-old girl went missing after her parents were murdered in their home. Police arrived within 4 minutes or so, but she is just gone. Of course, speculation is that she was kidnapped, or that she was in on it, or dead, or whatever. Nobody knows because she has completely vanished. 88 days later, in the dead of a northern Wisconsin winter, she runs out into the street to a woman walking her dog. She had been held captive about 40 minutes from her home. All of that is scary enough. But here's the terrifying part. She had never had any contact with the guy that murdered her family and abducted her. One day he was driving to a new job, at which he only lasted a day, and saw her get on the school bus. At that moment he decided that he was going to take her. There was no warning, no grooming. There was absolutely nothing that she or her family could have done to avoid everything. A creepy young man saw her from 100 away and decided that he would murder her family and take her for himself. The Nutty Putty Cave Incident. A spelunker got stuck upside down in a narrow cave for 26 hours. Crews tried to pull him out with pulleys, but had to be careful not to break his legs, because that could be fatal with the circumstances he was in. Rescuers even almost dislodged him, only for an anchor to fail at the last second, plunging him back into the crevice. He eventually died, and they sealed the cave shut with him inside. The Rape of Nanking. You can watch the documentary on Amazon. It's some of the most brutal attacks upon women and children that I've heard. It's heartbreaking. Soldiers would stick something up a woman's vagina to see how far it would go in. They would rape elderly women and children. They would sometimes let the prettier ones live. One soldier raped an 8-year-old girl in the street. There wasn't anything they could do but watch. I can't imagine the absolute pain and agony those poor people went through. I would call it creepy more than scary. But my mom's friend had a small house and lived alone. She noticed weird things. A batch of soup depleting faster than usual. Missing eggs. Damp towels in the hamper when she hadn't used any. Extra dishes in the dishwasher. Etc. This went on for months. She thought she was just being forgetful. One day she heard some thumping around in her attic and went to investigate. She found some makeshift living quarters. Small radio, hot plate, sleeping bag, pillow, food wrappers, etc. She called the cops, who came to keep an eye on the place. They ended up catching a homeless man climbing a tree, trying to sneak into her attic window. He had been doing this almost daily. He would wait for her to go to work, then go downstairs and help himself to food and amenities. The funny part about this story is they got to know each other throughout the ordeal. And the guy was actually very respectful. Just down on his luck. She didn't press charges. Instead, let him move in, helped him get a job, and he lived in the attic until he got back on his feet. Creepy shit with a happy ending. The Reina Marroquin story. A young lady had an affair with her boss in the 1960s. Got pregnant. After threatening to tell her boss's wife. She was killed by her boss, who then put her body in an industrial barrel. He hid the barrel in his house for years and none of the various owners opened it due to the weight. Finally, one guy decided to dispose of it in the 90s, and when he opened it he saw it contained something. An investigation traced the barrel and girl back to the man, who then killed himself before police could come arrest him after confirming he was the father of the unborn baby via DNA. The lady's mother was in her late 80s when she was told her missing daughter was finally found. She claims that she had been having dreams about her daughter being inside a metal container for years after she had gone missing. I'm not sure what the entire story is, but there was a body discovered somewhere in Siberia. His cause of death was freezing. But something was off. Turns out, he had been attacked by a tiger. The tiger used his jaws and grabbed the guy by his backpack, picked him up over his head, and slammed him so hard that it snapped both of his femurs. Poor dude lived 3 days after the attack, crawling around in the snow. The story of Hugh Glass. The man was left for dead after being mauled by a grizzly bear. 2 men were supposed to stay behind with him, but they were scared of Indians showing up. According to Wikipedia, Glass, who, in the best historical accounts, crawled and stumbled 200 miles, 320 kilometers, to Fort Kiowa, South Dakota, after being abandoned without supplies or weapons by fellow explorers. The man traveled 200 miles on foot while badly injured with the motivation of killing the 2 men who left him behind. He forgave one of them and he couldn't touch the other guy cause he joined the army. You get the death penalty for killing a soldier. The movie The Revenant was loosely based on it. Great movie, by the way. There was a guy in my town who stalked women at the furniture store. He would watch women pick out new chairs and he would just linger there and drop these strange comments. That chair would look nice in my den. Then, one night he followed one of the women home. He sneaked into their living room and then wait for them to enter the room. He'd then jump out and surprise them. He'd yell, "I knew you took my chair." And he'd scream and chase them. This happened over the course of 5 years. The local police never did anything because he was brothers with the sheriff. Women couldn't buy furniture by themselves. They had to start bringing chaperones. I don't know if it's scary, but when I was younger, me and my twin brother would help our friend do his paper route. One summer we could smell something gross coming from one of the houses. We all didn't think anything of it until 3 days later when the smell was reaching down the driveway. We went to the back door where he normally dropped the paper and noticed it was open. We went in and looked around the house and found the owner dead. He had died of a heart attack and his cats were eating him. Explorers like a century or two ago went to look about the Arctic but had their supplies accidentally destroyed and soon they all ran out. They hunted a polar bear and ate the insides of it. No one at the time knew about how deathly a polar bear's liver was, because of the high amounts of vitamin A, which can be bad for skin too. Toxicity made him and his crew deathly ill, and when one of them felt that their foot was wet, he took it out and the lining of his skin came off with the boot. True story. TLDR. Explorers killed a polar bear, ate its liver, CSME under the effects of vitamin A, skin loss and toxicity, and most probably died. A guy the first was good friends with had a party one night and called me to invite me over. It was me and my wife's first day off together in a while, and our daughter was 2 years old. I mentioned it to my wife and my daughter said, "No. Don't go, Daddy." Of course I can't resist that, so I stayed home and we had a good night. My friend, however, had the worst night of his life. His party was going good and everything was fine, even though there was a friend of a friend there who no one really knew. Turns out the stranger had been smoking PCP and decided to start killing people. He took a butcher knife and slashed 3 people's throats. My friend's wife threw their kids out of a 2-story window and jumped out herself, took them into the woods and called the police. All 3 people died. The police found the guy walking down the side of the road covered in blood and incoherent. He had no idea what he just did. So he said, "What really pisses me off is he was such a good guy. He was a big biker-looking teddy bear. Was never an asshole to anyone and always did what was the right thing. We worked together and hit it off from day one. Always ready with a joke and smile. Maybe not going saved my life. Or maybe I could have helped. That weighs on me even 20 years later. The fact that some little boss destroyed the lives of 3 good families that he didn't even know really pisses me off, and I hope he rots in prison and gets his ass kicked every day. Rip Blaine. You were a good man." The Order of 9 Angles actually exists. And it's not just a bunch of losers posting on the internet from their parents' basements either. What radiation poisoning does to you if you're not lucky enough to die quickly? The worst case that I can think of outside of the Chernobyl incident was the case of Hisashi Aochi, a Japanese plant worker who was exposed to fatal amounts of radiation, but thanks to his family and the doctors he was kept alive against his will for 83 goddamn days. A week into the hospital he said, "I can't take it anymore. I am not a guinea pig." Yet the doctors continued on. When he died, all of his skin had fallen off. All of the skin grafts had fallen off. He'd lost multiple limbs. And he was suffering heart attacks multiple times a day. There are pictures of him on his hospital bed that if you've been around the internet long enough, You'll know as part of the original Shocking Images collection. It looks like it came straight out of a torture porn movie. I sometimes work on the grounds of a nuclear power plant and always said that if the worst happened, and I was exposed to a lethal amount of radiation, that I would just kill myself rather than suffer. Something like that. Marine biologists attached a tag to a 9-foot-long great white shark. The device measured temperature and depth to monitor the shark's movements. The tag was later found washed up on a beach. Its data showed that 4 months after it was attached, the female great white abruptly dove to a depth of 1,903 feet, 580 meters. The ambient temperature surrounding the tag spiked from 46 degrees Fahrenheit to 78 degrees Fahrenheit, 8 degrees Celsius to 26 degrees Celsius. The data suggested an attack. So this tracker, attached to a great white, was pulled down rapidly and measured higher temperatures consistent with some animals' internal body temperature. Exclamation mark. One theory was that the culprit was another great white. Won't rule out Cthulhu though. Less than. This was posted here the last time. The story is about a woman who was found pushing her baby. Had been dead on a swing for 2 days. The baby died from hypothermia and dehydration. She was found not criminally negligent due to schizophrenia. Here is the article. Absolutely horrifying. Well, this is scary in a weird personal way. But here goes. My grandfather was hit in the lung pretty bad by a sniper in WW2. The bullet would have hit him right in his heart. But at the last second he hunched a little bit to light a cigarette. So, if my grandfather wasn't a smoker, I probably wouldn't exist right now.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.